In our last video, we went through the required user stories for our app in order to build what we see here on the screen. So we built out 3 different features. The first thing we did was we added a custom text, and this is what the hello from Karen text is. It was customly inputted by us. The second thing we did was we set a custom background color, and that's why the background of my app is pink right now. And the third thing we did was we added this button here where when we click on the button, it would change the color of the text. So like so. So when I click this button, it changes the color of my text from black to blue. So that's what I did in the last video, and that was all the required user stories. But in this second video, we're gonna follow up with these optional user stories, which are gonna be a little bit more advanced to build out. So this is gonna be fun. So let's take a look at the list of things we want to build out for this set of features. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a new button to change the color of the background view. So what we want to do something here is probably add another button here, and this time instead of changing the color of the text, we want to change this pink background to something else. So let's go back to our Android app, back where we left off. So if we go back to our activity main.xml, this is where all the layout this is where we've been doing all the layout changes. So if we go into our design view, so I was in the text view and then I switch over to design view. So this is a little easier where I could drag around stuff. I'm going to add a new button here. So I'm going to drag this button, and I'm going to put it right on top of the change text color button. And I'm going to drag it down a bit more. And back here in our attributes panel is where we can set the text, if you remember. So where it says Android text, instead of it saying button, I want it to say something like change view color instead, to differentiate it from the button that says change text color. So we change that. Everything else looks okay for me here. The ID is button 2. That's okay for now. And what we want to do now, if we want to hook up what happens when we click on it, is we have to go back to the main activity. This is where all the logic actually lives, right? So we probably want to do something similar to what we did for the first button, where we have to first grab the view, and to do that we have to do a find view by ID, and to grab the ID of the button, which if we go back here, we can see that this was button 2. So I'm going to copy button 2 and paste that here. So now that we grabbed the view, we're going to do something similar to what we did above, which is set on click listener for it. I'm going to do set on click listener. And I've been using autocomplete. So I did dot, the period, and I did set. And the first suggestion was set on click listener. So I pressed enter, and that's how it auto-generated the rest of the method name. And we need to pass it on click listener object. And so I'm going to type in new view. And the first suggestion is the exact object I want to create. So I'm just going to press enter. Thank you, autocomplete. And now we can put in whatever we want to happen when this button is clicked. So we go back to our user story. What we actually want is when we tap this button, we want to change the color of the background view. So if you remember from how we changed the color of the text view, first we had to grab the view with the find view ID, and we did something like set text color. So if we go back and do something similar, we could do the same thing where you first have to grab the view, find view by ID. But the problem here is now, how do we grab the view of the entire thing? Well, if we go back to our layout file and go back to the text view, we can see that this background here, where we set the color accent, which is actually pink. So this view is the whole thing. This root view is what we're setting the background color to. And right now, there's no way for us to grab it. But if we added an ID for this root view, we would be able to grab it back in our main activity class. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to add an ID for this view so that we can grab this view in our main activity. So I'm going to call it root view. So now this whole parent view here, this whole screen has a root view ID. So now I can grab it back in my main activity. And similarly, I want to set the background color. So I'm going to see if there is something where I could automatically set the background color. So I'm going to keep typing until I see a method that I want to use. And luckily, the second session is setting background color. So I'm going to use that. And I'm going to do the same thing, similar to what we did on top, where we kind of see what colors are available for us. So there's different kinds of color. Before, for the text color, we were using blue. So I don't think we've used primary dark before, so I'm going to see what that is. That looks awfully close to color primary. So I don't really like any of these colors right now. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go and find the hex color for a color I actually want. So in order to set the background to something to a color that's not already defined in the app. So I kind of want to set it to orange. So I'm going to just Google for hex color orange. And I get all these different things, different results, and this looks like a great color. So I'm going to copy this hex color. I'm going to copy the hex value of this color. I'm going to go back into Android Studio. And the way to do this here is if you actually look into the colors file, the way these colors are defined is in a file here called colors.xml. So I'm going to click into the colors.xml. And you'll see that the way we've been accessing the colors before is because they're already defined with their hex values. So I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to call it orange. And copy the hex value that I had, paste the hex values I had previously copied. So now I have a new orange color that I can use here. So now if you see, I can actually access that orange color that I had defined in the colors.xml file. And suddenly we're going to get this error that says we have to pass a resolved color instead of the resource ID. So I'm going to copy and paste what we have here to actually resolve the color here. So I'm just going to make the indents a little better so it's easier to read. So this is similar to what we did for the text color, except now we're setting it on this root view here. So what we did first was we grabbed the view, the whole root view, by using find view by ID, and then we called this set background method, and then we added a new color into the colors XML file in order to access this new color here. And we set the background color with this way. So what this code should be doing is when we click on this button 2, it should be able to grab this root view and set the background color to orange instead of pink. So let's test to see if this works by running our app. So I'm going to go into Run App. And we're going to see if all our changes have made it into the app, and that when we click this new button that we created, that the background of our color changes. So this is good because we already see our new button here. And let's see what happens when we click it. Ah, great. So the our background color changed from pink to orange, which is exactly what we want. And let's just check to see that our first button still works. Ah, great. So our text color is still able to be changed. So that's great. So we finished our first optional user story, which is changing the background color. The next one we want to do is we want to add another button. And instead of changing any colors this time, we want to actually change the text of a label. So right now our text says hello from Karen, and only the color was able to change. So we want to actually change the string here. So let's go back to Android Studio. So we want to create another button for sure. So I'm going to go back to my design. I'm going to drag another button on top here. I'm going to name this button change text. So in my Android text, instead of it saying button, I'm going to say change text. And everything else looks okay for me. So this looks great. So now I'm going to go back to my main activity file. And we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing, which is grabbing the view first by find view by ID. And the ID of the new button we created, if you see here, it was button 3. So I'm going to copy and paste that here. And now I'm going to do the same thing that we've been doing, which is setting an on-click listener. So I'm going to let autocomplete work its magic, do set on-click listener. And I want to pass it a new on-click listener object. So I'm going to let autocomplete do its job. Now we can do whatever we want in this on-click thing. So what we want is to change the text string of the label. So a couple of steps are involved here. To change the text string of the label, we have to first grab the view, right? Because we can't do anything without first grabbing the view. And in order to grab the view here, we already did it up here when we were changing the text color. So I'm going to copy and paste what we have here, which is first grabbing a view and then casting it to a text view so we could do specific text related methods on it, because you can't set a text for a random view like a button, right? Or actually for a button you can, but say it was like a radio button, then you wouldn't be able to set a text for that. Or say it was like an image view, you wouldn't be able to set a text on that. So we need to cast it to a text view in order to get these specific text view methods. So we have our text view, and what we want to do is we actually want to set some different kind of text. So I'm going to see what autocomplete gets me, and luckily for us, there's a lot of different set texts. So I'm going to do set text, and let's say instead of saying hello, I want to say goodbye. So based on what we have here, what should happen is when we click on this button that had the ID button 3, we should be able to see this text view change to goodbye. So let's run our app and see what happens. So our app is running. And hopefully we'll see a couple different things. The first thing, we should see three buttons now. And when we click on the newest button, we should see our text change. Okay, this is a great sign. So we already first see our first button, which is great, the new button that we added, which is change text. So when we click on this, our text should change from hello to goodbye. Great. So we were able to change our text because we were able to set an on-click listener to do the text changing. Let's just to check everything else still works. So changing the background color still works, and changing the text color still works. Great. So everything still works. So now we got 2 of our optional user stories done. Now we want to be able to reset everything back to their default. So every time we tap on the background view, we want everything to go back to normal. So a couple things need to go back to normal. One thing, we have to change the text back to what it originally was. We want to be able to change the background color back to what it originally was. And we also want to be able to change the text color back to what it originally was. So 3 things we have to reset when we click on this background view in general. So let's go back to our Android Studio and think about how we could approach this. So what we want to do is when we click on this background here, we want everything to be able to reset. So the first thing we want to do is we probably want to be able to we want to grab the background view in general, the giant parent view of the background, and be able to set a click listener to it, similar to how we've been doing, how we've been handling clicks for these buttons. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get the background. And the background, as we learned from here, that we've been using to set the different colors, it had an ID of root view. So let's grab this view in main activity. And similarly to how we've been doing it with the buttons, we can set an on-click listener for it. So autocomplete is always your friend here, and I'm using autocomplete a lot so I can type a lot less. So now we have to figure out what actually happens when we click on this root view. And root view, if you recall, is just this whole parent view that contains all these little button views and text views inside it. So 3 things we want to do when we click on this view. So the first thing is we want to reset the text color back to the original. So this is going to be helpful. So something that's helpful that I like to do a lot is splitting my screen to be able to see 2 different files at once. And the way you do that is by right-clicking on one of your files, and then there's this option to say split vertically. So this is great because now I can look at 2 different views all at once. And this, I don't really need to look at this navigation thing anymore, so I'm going to close this by clicking on this button here to hide this panel. This gives me more space to work with. So now on one screen, I can see everything that's happening on with my actual layout view, but also everything that's happening in my main activity. And since this preview is not really helpful anymore right now, I'm going to click on this preview option here to close it. And then I'm going to make the text bigger here so we can see this a little better. All right, so 3 things we want to do is, the first thing is we want to set the text color back to its original. And if we see here, the original color was black. So we want to set the text color back to black. Second thing we want to do is we want to reset the background color back to its original color, which is this color accent that was defined in our colors.xml file. And the third thing we want to do is reset the text back to hello from Karen. So these are the three things we want to do, and I usually like to make comments before I actually write actual code, just to remember the logic and get it down before I actually start writing code to transform the logic into code. So the first thing we want to do is reset the text color back to black. So that could be done similarly to how we set the text color up here. So up here we were setting text color to primary, but if I copy and paste this code, we could probably set it to black. So I'm missing parentheses here. So all I did was copy and paste the 2 lines of code we have up here down here. But instead of setting it to primary, I want to set it to black here. I don't see black here, but one thing we can do is we could define the color black ourselves. So I clicked into see how black was defined here by going to command and then B. So that took me to this file, which told me that the hex color of this thing was this, the hex value of this color was this thing. Now I'm going to go into my colors file and define black here. Then over here I should be able to use it now. Great, so this is our line to reset the text color back to black. The second thing we want to do is reset the background color to color accent. So this is very similar to how we set the background color here. So I'm going to copy and paste what we did here to set it to orange. Except instead now I want to set the color to color accent. And the last thing is we want to reset the text back. So this is obviously going to be very similar to what we did for our last button we added, where we grabbed the text view and set it to goodbye. So I'm going to copy and paste the code we had here for setting the text to goodbye and put it here. Except now we want to change it back to what it originally was, which is hello from Karen. So instead of goodbye, we want to set it to this. So let's take a brief review of what we did here. So what we were trying to accomplish is we were trying to get it so that when the user taps on the background view, we want to reset all the views to the default settings. And what that meant was 3 different things. One, we had to reset the text color black to black. Second, we had to reset the background color. And third, we had to reset the text itself back to hello from your name. And to do that, we first grabbed the root view itself and then set it on click listener on the whole parent view itself. And then once the parent, anywhere on the parent view is clicked, we do these 3 different things. So let's run our app and see if that worked. So on the surface, nothing should have changed. We should still see 3 buttons. We should still see the original text, and the buttons should still do the same thing. But the only thing that should change now is that once we do our different things on this with these buttons, once we click on the background, everything should be reset. So let's just check to see that our buttons still work. We can still change the text, we can still change the view color, we can still change the text color. But now when we click on the background, everything should reset itself. And it did. That's great. So that's exactly what we expected. Let's just check to make sure that even if we just change one thing, everything resets. Yeah, so this is great. So every time we change something, once we click on the background view itself, everything is able to reset. Great, so now we have our 3rd optional story done. So for our last optional story, we want to be able to let users update this text here to anything they input themselves. So what this is going to require is we need a place for users to type something in. So this means we have to bring the keyboard up, and we want to be able to grab whatever they typed in and be able to populate it here. So let's do that now. So what we're going to try to, the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to have a place for user to input their custom text. So the way to do that in Android is, I'm going to close this main activity for now and go back to our XML file. So the way to do that is with something called edit text. And unfortunately, the way to look for whether a widget is droppable from this thing is with the search search bar here, and the widget we want is called edit text. And unfortunately, it's not draggable from here. But what we can do is we could go into the text view of the XML and be able to add it ourselves. So we could do something like edit text. And this will ask you for, okay, how big, how wide do you want this view to be? I think 200 should be okay. So we can see a preview to what it looks like, for what it looks like. So once we define all these things, we should be able to see a preview of what it looks like. So this blue box that's drawn out here is what it looks like now. That looks like okay. I'm gonna make it a little wider in case people want to type in more stuff. And then I'm gonna go back to the design view to be able to drag this around so that it's in a place I like. So I'm gonna drag it to the middle and add a little margin on top. So now it's more over there. And then you can see over here, you can also define the different types of attributes here. And since this is a text view, the same kind of thing, we want to give it an ID so we could be able to grab it in our main activity. So I'm going to give an ID of edit text. So what does edit text mean is that once a user clicks into this view, so once they click into anywhere in this blue box here, the keyboard, it should be able to pop up. So let's run it and see what happens. So all we've done really right now is add this edit text view, and we just kind of position up here where we would be able to type into it. So you can't really see it right now, so I'm gonna click, but if I click into it, you'll see that the keyboard comes up and I can start typing stuff in it. And I can even add some emoticons. I can hide the keyboard again, but unfortunately, the stuff we type isn't really doing anything right now, so that's not very helpful. So let's think about what we have to do in order to grab what the user typed here and put it into this text view here. So two-step process. First, we have to grab what's inputted into our edit text view here. And the second step is we have to take that string and put it into the text view we have here. And we all want this to happen when this change text is clicked, right? So there's three things we want to do. So first we have to grab the text the user inputted, and then we want to put the text into our text view once the change text button is clicked. All right, so this means we should modify what the change button text on click listener does. So if we go back here, this is the on click listener that was changing the text of our text view. So instead of it just simply saying goodbye now, we want to actually grab whatever the user inputted and put it into the text view. So I'm going to copy these two lines of comment and add it here so we can remember what we wanted to do. And I'm going to take this line out since that's no longer what we want. So first we need to grab the text the user inputted. And the way to do that is similar to how we've been grabbing the views for the buttons and the root view. So we do a find view by ID, and if we go back to our XML file, we had made the ID of this view edit text. So we need to find this view, and then we want to grab whatever text was here. So hopefully there's a get text, but there isn't, and that's because right now Android still thinks this is just a regular view, so it doesn't think it could grab a text from it. So what we need to do is cast the edit text class to it, and I need to import the edit text class by doing option enter. And what that did was add this line up here. So that's what option enter did. It imported this class that we need. So once we have that, let's see if we could grab the text. So it'd be something like get text. Great. So we can call this function get text, but if you notice, it returns us an editable, which is not a string specifically. So what we have to do is actually call the toString method to get the actual string. So I'm going to save this in a variable called new text. And this is what we want to display once the user clicks this button. So if we do this, now we want to do similar to what we did before, which is grab the text view and set the text to something new. So grab the text view, and we're going to set the text to our new text. Great, so now we have everything that we think we need, but let's go back to our user options and see if we have anything. So we have this thing where the user can enter text using the keyboard. We did that by creating a new edit text view. We want to be able to say tap a button and update the label from whatever the user inputted. But also we need to handle the case where if the text field is empty, we need to update the label with a default text string. So for example, if the user was in here and the view was actually empty, we don't want this app to crash if it says change text. Right now, it's only doing goodbye, but what happens if this thing is empty and we say change text? It wouldn't be really great if they just saw like an empty text field, so let's populate it with a default text. So the way to do that is now we have to check to see if new text is empty. And there's a very handy text utils class that says is empty. We can pass in our new text. So if it's empty, then we have to populate it with some default text. But if it's not empty, then we can set it to what the user inputted. So I'm going to copy the same text here, and instead of setting it to a new text, which we checked was empty, now I'm going to set it to the same thing which the app originally displayed, which is hello from Karen. So a couple things we did here. We modified the on-click listener for the button so that instead of it changing the text to the same text every time, now we're grabbing an input that the user has put in it so that we can display custom text based on what the user inputted. But we also wanted to check to see if the custom text input was empty in order to set it to a default text. So let's run this app and see if it works. So on the surface, nothing should have changed. We should still see 3 buttons with the text and an edit text view. But now, hopefully, when we enter some custom text into our text view, we can actually see it be populated in our text view here. So click into our invisible thing here. I'm going to do some emoticons. And then I'm going to hide my keyboard with the back button. And then when I click change text, the text view here should change to what I inputted here. Oh, great, awesome. That looks way cooler. But I'm going to test one more thing just to make sure that if our text view is empty, something is still populated in that text field. Okay, great. So that was our default text. And we're still able to change everything else. So everything else still works. And I guess the orange background is a little better since our edit text thing was a pink color, which is the same color as our background color. So we could change that. If you're interested to learn how to change that, I encourage you to Google how to change the color of an edit text field. But this completes all of our user stories optional user stories that we're going for. And so hopefully you were able to learn a lot more from the optional user stories, and this gets you really excited about building more Android apps.